Hey, how's it going? This video is about my journey with Destiny, some of my thoughts on the game and how it has affected my life throughout the years. I hope this video resonates with you as we look back at what Destiny was and is now. Destiny means a lot to me. I've made a lot of friends through playing this game and, of course, plenty of memories as well. I'm excited to jump into it and explore some nostalgic memories. I guess the best place to start is just where it all began. This song still gives me chills every time I hear it. Not because of what it is, but what it means to me. To all of us who chose to press play for the very first time.
Guardian? Eyes up, Guardian. It worked. You're alive. You don't know how long I've been looking for you. I'm a ghost. Actually, now I'm your ghost. And you, well, you've been dead a long time. So you're gonna see a lot of things you won't understand. This is fallen territory. We aren't safe here. I have to get you to the city. Hold still. Don't worry, I'm still with you. We need to move. Fast.
Destiny is not perfect in any way, shape, or form. As most know, while Destiny was in development, the story was shifted around, diced to pieces, until they finally were able to get a story that was decent enough for the thumbs up approval, of course, for launch. Destiny was rushed to launch, which left us with a game feeling kind of lacking in all sorts of corners. Mostly for the endgame, but even getting loot was rough. Because at that time, getting Legendary Engram didn't always mean that. Getting Legendary Engram was actually a blue in disguise. But, even with all of these flaws, it showed just enough to get me hooked. I was hooked on the fantasy of Destiny. The gunplay and show of force through your abilities was a satisfaction and, quite frankly, an addiction I've never felt before. I've always loved the Halo series, and Halo Reach will always be my favorite of all time, but you have to admit that Bungie made something really special with this one. As the story of Destiny ends, they release some questionable expansions with the release of The Dark Below and The House of Wolves, but even though they weren't perfect in their own ways, they added some things that were pretty memorable. Like the Crota Zen raid and the Prison of Elders, but those are not the expansions that changed Destiny. I think everybody knows the expansion that changed this game forever. The Taken King was revolutionary for the game. It added the one thing that I think was truly missing, and that was depth, an actual story. The stories before it were lackluster, but now we had something with actual backbone. Something with actual tension and lore that can have you searching the grimoires on Bungie.net just to get another slice. It fixed issues that were in the game, like the endgame and a raid that, for the time, was so complex that it changed raiding for the better. The Taken King is my favorite expansion that Bungie has ever released. This was it. I was addicted. For that time, it was not just a game, but a lifestyle that I've never experienced, but of course I loved all the same. After the Taken King was finished, we got the Rise of Iron expansion, which was cool in its own way, with a raid that can easily top many raids in Destiny 2, but wasn't the same as the Taken King. I never actually played the Rise of Iron, but I did recently hop back on Destiny to give it a try, and I was definitely underwhelmed, but not surprised. It didn't have the same kick as the Taken King, but it was really just a placeholder for Destiny 2's development, and it was kind of just sandwiched together. The Rise of Iron had the return of the glorious Gjallarhorn, but of course that wasn't enough to keep players hooked for the unfortunate drought that we got during the time of Destiny 2's development. It was an okay expansion, but the Taken King will always be my favorite expansion that was added in Destiny's history. Now that only really leaves us with one thing. The next release that Bungie was cooking up and had in store. Destiny 2's launch was awful. Bungie had a great formula with Destiny 1 and a franchise that had so much potential. All they had to do was build upon what they already had, but somehow, they messed it up. When they developed Destiny 2, they really had PvP in mind, and looking back at Destiny 1, the most popular game mode during that time was Trials of Osiris. And Trials of Osiris is a 5-round 3v3 game mode that popped off when it first launched, and it carried the game pretty much through all of its worst times. So Bungie thought that if they catered towards those players, their game would be successful. Right? Wrong. They came out with awful systems like double primaries, leaving your heavy and secondaries in the same slot. They took away random rolled weapons, which sucked the loot chase right out of the game. They also slowed down our movement, so the gameplay was a lot slower. And there's more I could go on about, but all these things left the game feeling so incredibly stale and boring that you couldn't play for more than an hour. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. The campaign, in my own opinion, wasn't too bad, but it definitely wasn't perfect. I think the main villain was kind of wasted, only seeing him at the last possible second as the final boss, and feeling pretty underwhelming, but overall a decent story, again, in my own opinion. Another thing I liked at launch was the raid, the Leviathan. The raid had an atmosphere that was very new to Destiny. At the time, it was the only thing in the game that somewhat posed a challenge, and had encounters that actually changed weekly, which not a single raid in Destiny's history, even to this day, has replicated. There were some later expansions that released, with Curse of Osiris and Warmind, that were pretty forgettable. Warmind had its moments when we got the Whisper mission and the planet activities that did keep us occupied for the time. With the way that Destiny 2 launched, it's hard to imagine that it was a good thing, but in my opinion, if Destiny 2 didn't launch the way it did, we never would have gotten one of the best expansions in Destiny 2's history. Forsaken was the best expansion that has ever released in Destiny 2. I'll start at what Forsaken did for the game. Forsaken fixed so many issues that the game had. A big issue that Forsaken fixed was the double primary system that everybody hated, including myself. Not only could we finally equip a secondary in the second slot, but we can also equip it in the first slot as well, changing up the weapon dynamic in a way that we weren't even close to being used to. They also finally added random rules back to the game, finally giving us a reason to chase weapons again. I could go on and on about all the things that Forsaken fixed, but we could be here a while. After beating the campaign, you unlock a whole new area in the Dreaming City that was actually on a weekly rotation, changing up the map, giving us different secret missions to seek out and chase every week. Not only that, but on the third week of the cycle, you had access to the first dungeon that has ever released, and at the time was a serious challenge for those who dared to enter. We also got one of the most complex raids that took a team a whopping 18 hours and 48 minutes to complete, and to this day is still my favorite raid in the game. One lousy thing that Forsaken came with was Gambit, and I will admit that Gambit at the time was fun, but right now, to me, it's the worst thing on this planet. And Bungie, please, delete it from the game. Thank you very much. The one thing that I would say was sort of a flaw for the expansion was the campaign. It wasn't awful in any way, but I'll never fully agree that killing off Cade for marketing was the greatest decision they could have made. Compared to the other zombified characters in this franchise, Cade was always the one that felt the most alive and relatable, and to me, to kill him off the only character that we cared about was kind of a cheap throwaway just for sales. Maybe I'm just a Cade fanboy, I don't know. Rest in peace, Cade. We'll always miss you. Forsaken, in my own opinion, was the exact expansion that Destiny needed. It brought Destiny back to the light after being in the dark for so long. I will always look back at the grind for the Ace of Spade exotic, and playing the story with my best friend is some of my greatest memories. After Forsaken, there was a lot of releases, but I'll just real quick go over a couple that I think had the best story, and one release that, in my opinion, was the worst story I've probably ever played. The Witch Queen was a great expansion. I think it's pretty well known that the Witch Queen story was one of the best stories that Bungie's cooked up so far. It had great pacing and left you with questions for you to figure out, but never let on too long that you would feel frustrated. It was one of the longest running campaigns that Bungie made until that point, and you could tell that a lot of the effort in that expansion was put into the story and lore. Another thing that the Witch Queen had was the release of weapon crafting, a system that, up to this point, changed the way that we chase loot. Whether crafting is a good thing or a bad thing for the game is still being debated to this day, but recently it seems that Bungie wants to kind of stray away from it a little bit, using crafting as a catch-up mechanic instead of the actual loot chase. The Witch Queen had a pretty solid raid with a boss fight that challenged us in a different way that we weren't used to, and of course the weapons at the time had you questioning if they were really legendaries or just exotics in disguise. The Witch Queen was a really solid expansion, and really had everyone excited for the future of the game. It left everybody eager to see what was next, but if only everybody knew that the next expansion would almost kill the game for good. And that expansion was Lightfall. I seriously don't know what Bungie was thinking with Lightfall. The story was absolutely horrible. The whole thing felt like a tutorial just for Strain and had no meaning or any sort of direction at all. The dialogue for the story is some of the worst dialogue I've ever heard, and I'll just leave this clip to show exactly what I mean.
If the radio mast links with the Veil, it's all over. You and Rohan are our only hope.
Do I need to say more? They introduced the Veil to us without any actual explanation as to what it is, and they wanted us to learn about it through the seasonal content down the line, but it was done so horribly that it got to a point that no one really cared anymore. At least not me. They did eventually hear our outrage and release a short cinematic and weekly dialogue through a freaking computer to help explain what it was, but they should have just done that from the start. The raid for the expansion was so easy that it only took the first team 2.5 hours to beat. A whole 16-hour difference from the Last Wish raid. Lightfall for Bungie was actually a hit with a lot of new and returning players to check it out, but the expansion was a poison of Bungie's own making. Lightfall lost more players than they had before the expansion, and they are still feeling the drawbacks to this day. They had to have layoffs just to counteract what Lightfall did to them. Lightfall did have a couple of good additions to the game, I will admit, with obviously the new Strand subclass and weapon loadouts, but even those weren't enough to help carry it at all. At this point, Bungie just had to move on, to look forward and hope that the next expansion would save them from their own failures. The Final Shape was an amazing expansion. The first showcase that Bungie had for the Final Shape scared me a lot. It showed no real promise, and I think even Bungie knew that, because not too long after that showcase they delayed the expansion for 6 months to work on it, just for a little bit longer. I think everyone was pretty skeptical that they were actually going to be able to do anything in 6 months, but I think I can say for most of us that we were definitely proven wrong. The second showcase showed us Prismatic, the new enemy race, and the new exotic class items that were all being added to the game. I was shocked. I actually returned my pre-order after the first showcase because I was so let down, but I pre-ordered it again right after the second one. I was so hyped, and I think that the expansion really lived up to it. The story was some of their best storytelling with really good tension and character building I don't think I've ever seen in a game before. Prismatic definitely causes some serious balancing issues to the game, but is definitely some of the most fun I've ever had on a subclass. The new enemy race adds a different type of difficulty, with their AI being pretty intelligent and using pretty annoying abilities that could cause a wipe if you're not careful. And if Prismatic wasn't enough to break the game, they added the exotic class items, which allowed you to have a variety of different exotic perks, not just from your own class, but from others as well. Bungie knew that they really had to go all out, and I think they delivered, in my opinion. The new raid, Salvation's Edge, was one of the most difficult raids that they've ever released. It beat the record from Last Wish by about half hour, taking them a total of 19 hours to beat for the first team to complete it. It took me about 8 hours to complete on my first run on the raid, which took me days to complete, but I had a blast doing it. I don't think this raid has the best replayability, but beating it was definitely satisfying. It was about 4 in the morning when I finally beat it, and I yelled so loud that I scared my mom to death. Almost got a beating that morning. Unfortunately, Bungie actually didn't get the sales that they wanted and had to actually lay off more people, but in my eyes, I think the final shape was a win for the players. So, where does that leave us now? As of the recording of this video, Bungie revealed the Edge of Fate expansion and teased Renegade, which I have mixed feelings about. I think the Edge of Fate won't be a crazy expansion, but a really good one for the game. There are a ton of really good changes coming with the release of the expansion, like armor changes, ammo changes, stat changes, seasonal model changes, event changes, weapon changes, sandbox changes, which are all amazing changes. In my opinion, I think the most important are the armor changes to add up a little bit of build crafting and grind, and the new seasonal model. And I bring up the seasonal model because I don't think everyone really understands just how important that change really is. All new seasonal content will be completely free to all players and will be permanent. That is a huge change, especially for new players. It gives them an actual reason to hop on and play the new activities to grind every so often instead of being held hostage behind a paywall. It was one of Destiny's biggest drawbacks, and it's finally moving in a free-to-play direction, and I am all for it. I have a really good feeling about the direction that Destiny is heading, and I think Bungie is finally making some solid changes to the game for the players and not themselves. I love this game. I was here from killing the Black Heart all the way to killing the Witness, and I will continue to play the game until the servers are finally shut down for good. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I had a lot of fun putting it all together. It was really nice to look back at what Destiny was and what it will be for the future. Drop something in the comments about what Destiny means to you, and of course, thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.